Right now, behind closed doors, the map of America is being completely rewritten, and it might literally mean your vote is being erased before you even step into a voting booth. There is a secret cartographic arms race happening in states like Texas and Florida, and it could entirely decide who runs the country for the next decade. While everyone else is focused on the daily, hyper-fast news cycle, politicians are actively handpicking their own voters to make sure they can never be fired.
We've entered the era of the forever map, where politicians keep moving the goalposts until they're the only ones who can score. That phrase has been everywhere lately, and it perfectly captures the precise reality of American politics today. Look, this isn't just about boring lines drawn on a piece of paper. When districts are actively cracked, meaning communities are literally split apart or packed tightly together, it means the people in power can safely ignore what your community actually wants. Why? Because they've already mathematically guaranteed their own victory, months before Election Day even happens.
Part 1. The Trigger, Louisiana v. Callais. So what actually sparked this massive structural change? It all traces back to a major, kind of under-the-radar Supreme Court ruling from May 2026 called Louisiana v. Callais. That decision effectively changed the rules of the entire game overnight. Under the old Voting Rights Act, the legal standard asked a really simple impact-based question. Did this map hurt minority voters? The real-world results actually mattered. But the new legal standard established by the court asks something entirely different. Now it's, can you prove the mapmakers intentionally meant to be racist? And wow, that creates a loophole big enough to drive a truck through. Proving discriminatory intent inside a complex, messy legislative body, that is an incredibly difficult legal task. It essentially allows politicians to dismantle minority opportunity districts entirely, just as long as they claim their motives are purely for partisan advantage. As long as they shrug and say, hey, we did it to win seats, not because of race, the courts are basically giving them a green light.
And when you look at the current U.S. House, the motivation to exploit this massive loophole becomes glaringly obvious. We are sitting on a razor-thin majority of just 217 to 212. That intense, honestly suffocating political pressure has pushed both parties to completely abandon any of those old gentlemen's agreements about waiting 10 years for a new census. We are now in a ruthless, ongoing game of perpetual redistricting. The maps are constantly shifting just to protect those incredibly narrow margins.
Part 2. The Battlefield, an interstate arms race.
State legislatures are capitalizing on this new legal environment with surgical precision. And what's genuinely wild to me is the sheer speed of this timeline. Maps are being entirely rewritten for an election happening just 6 months later. Late last year, North Carolina enacts a veto-proof redraw. Then, suddenly, Florida passes a new map in April, and it's signed into law by early May. Days later, Tennessee completely erases a Democratic seat in Memphis. And the very next day, the Virginia Supreme Court voids Democratic gains there. We used to establish these boundaries once every decade. Now, it feels like the lines are being drawn in pencil. And the structural advantage being built here is just staggering. Look at these numbers. Texas is projecting a +5 seat gain for Republicans. Florida is looking at +4. Ohio adds 2, and Tennessee adds 1. That is a carefully engineered cushion. They are fundamentally moving the 50-yard line of the electoral map. They're insulating themselves against that historical trend where the president's party usually loses seats during the midterms.
But we really need to look past the raw numbers for a second, because the specific human impacts here are huge. Take Tennessee, for example. The 9th District, which is centered in Memphis, a deeply concentrated urban area, was cracked into 3 separate pieces. Those city voters were taken and attached to surrounding rural and suburban communities. It's a move that's projected to guarantee an all-Republican delegation in the state. Meanwhile, Democratic counteroffensives are hitting massive judicial brick walls. In Virginia, a constitutional referendum for a 10-to-1 Democratic redraw was entirely voided on procedural grounds. And up in New York, the U.S. Supreme Court actually stepped in to stop the redrawing of the 11th District.
Part 3. The Plot Twist, the Cracking Paradox.
But in this frantic rush to completely dominate the map, there is a massive hidden vulnerability that almost everyone in the media is missing right now. Political scientists call it the cracking paradox. The idea is pretty simple. When mapmakers try to maximize their total number of seats, they have to spread their reliable voters really thin across multiple districts. They take those deep blue or deep red urban centers, chop them up, and distribute those voters into the surrounding areas. Sure, it looks fantastic on paper for gaining total seats, but it inherently reduces the safety margin for the incumbents in those surrounding districts. So in their rush to flip more seats, political mapmakers might actually be building a highly fragile house of cards.
You see, the old historical strategy was packing, basically insulating your incumbents by concentrating all the opposition voters into a few lost districts. It was super low risk and it ensured total stability. But this new cracking strategy, it actively trades those safe seats for lean seats. Yeah, you get a higher total number of seats, but your margins are incredibly tight, and that leaves the party totally exposed. Think about it. If public opinion shifts by even 5 to 7 points nationally, whether that's because of inflation, a sudden crisis, or just a change in the national mood, those slightly leaning districts become highly vulnerable overnight. A sudden shift could cause an unexpected collapse for the exact same party that drew the map.
Part 4. The Horizon, the 2030 Blueprint.
So how are Democrats responding to this massive structural disadvantage? Well, out west, California voters recently approved Proposition 50, which authorized a new congressional map that's projected to net Democrats 5 to 6 additional seats. And here is a bold prediction for you. This newly minted California map survived federal judicial challenges, specifically under the umbrella of permissible partisan gerrymandering. Because the Supreme Court has basically deferred to state legislatures on partisan map drawing, that exact same legal shield now protects Democratic redraws in places like California. This map is almost certainly going to become the master blueprint for a massive Democratic counteroffensive heading into the 2030 cycle.
I want us to pause and really reflect on this for a second. If the 2026 election is decided by just 1 or 2 seats in districts that were completely redrawn at the last possible second, will the losing side and their voters even believe the result is fair? When politicians are handpicking their voters just to avoid being fired, it rapidly accelerates the erosion of competitive elections. The number of true toss-up districts in this country is reaching historic lows, and that is a truly chilling long-term cost to a competitive democracy.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. Is partisan gerrymandering just a ruthless survival tactic that both sides simply have to play? Or has it finally reached a point where it is actively destroying the legitimacy of our elections? I want to know exactly what you think. Drop your specific midterm predictions and your take on this whole map-making arms race down in the comments below.
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.